So, I mean, this is the article, and Thom Hartman makes a very good point. JD Vance is a grifter just like his new boss. Trump has been ripping off hardworking people for decades. Now, a chosen running mate who's made millions pretending to be a hillbilly. They're the perfect people to lead the party of grift. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz on Tuesday blasted JD Vance for being a grifter because Vance claimed he was some sort of hillbilly who grew up in rural Appalachia. In fact, he grew up in the suburbs of Cincinnati. Governor Waltz, on the other hand, grew up in a town of 400 people with 24 kids in my graduating class, where 12 were cousins. In Vance's autobiography, Hillbilly Elegy, he trash talks his poor relatives. Oh, very, very charming. You know, trashing your relatives. Oof. You know, in print, you know, essentially accusing them of not being successful in life because of moral defects like laziness and addiction. And, you know, this isn't just venting frustration about having to deal with one's relatives. I mean, this is just outright accusing them of. And he doubled down on these memes in an RNC speech, pointing out his mother's drug use. In fact, they're victims of Republican policies that make the rich richer and keep the poor poor. His mother's addiction is a symptom, not a cause. Vance, of course, nobly, quote, and it quotes on purpose, rose above it all with the help of our socialist GI Bill, which Republicans opposed, paying his way through Yale, and with the help of some right-wing billionaires who took Vance under their wings and helped him set up a hedge fund that made him fabulously rich. Often the media refers to his life as a true, quote, Horatio Alger story, unquote. When I was a kid, my dad and the national president of the book collecting club, the Horatio Alger Society. Vance is a story right out of Alger's books. Alger wrote stories about poor young men being lifted into business success by wealthy older men, although he's now out of favor because he was busted as a sex predator. Woo! Ooh, I did not know that. Whew. Wow. Even the Horatio Alger story itself, as it turns out, was a grift. Just like Vance's career and his life story are a grift, just like most of Donald Trump's failed businesses, just like Richard Nixon's racist law and order grift, and the Reagan's tax cuts for the rich, quote, supply side, unquote, grift, and Bush and Cheney's oil grabbing Iraq, quote, weapons of mass destruction, unquote, grift. Republican policies, in fact, have been one long grift for more than half of a century, largely thanks to Ronald Reagan's 1983 suspension of enforcement of the Sherman Antitrust Act and other similar legislation. The entire American economy has become one giant grift. Every company, it seems, is trying to hustle us, pretend they care almost about customer service or making or selling quality products as a corporate mission statement has become a rude joke. It's all grift. So why should it surprise us that our post-Reagan politics have all been almost dominated by grifters for 40 plus years, and now two grifters are running for presidency on the Republican ticket? As I document in gruesome detail in the hidden history of neoliberalism how Reaganism gutted America, since Reagan and the Republicans on the Supreme Court adopted Robert Bork's idea that monopolies were a sign of economic success, rather than a crisis, everything has gotten more consolidated and thus more expensive. Reaganomics effectively killed competition. Cell phone service that costs $15 a month in France or $12 in Australia bills out to an average $61.87 per month in the United States. High-speed broadband that's a little over $31 a month in France or $36 in Germany for higher speeds and better reliability than almost anywhere in the U.S. averages $70 per month in the U.S. America is literally the only developed country in the world where families get wiped out or rendered homeless by medical bankruptcy simply because somebody got sick. We're the only developed country in the world with widespread college debt. We're the only developed country whose entire healthcare system rests on predatory for-profit health insurance companies, doctors' offices, and hospitals owned by hedge funds and pharmacy benefit managers. You know, similar metrics are found with virtually every other product or service dominated by giant corporations that are all grifting us and getting rich doing it. The average American pays around $5,000 a year more for the general necessities of life than the average European, Japanese, South Korean, Canadian, Taiwanese, or Australian family. And things are steadily getting worse as monopolistic corporations and cartels tighten their grip on every American industry from banking to telecom to food. They even used inflation as an opportunity to grift, pushing prices up way above the actual inflation rate. Corporate profits and executive pay over the last 2 years are higher than they've ever been in American history. And when was this article written? I'm trying to get a date that Thom Hartman put this one up, so that was 2024. So that was, he's talking about 2022 to 2024. It's all grift, making stockholders and executives rich by impoverishing working people. I mean, I've read about all this, which is why we started investing ourselves. It was like, oh god, if stock owners are a winner, let's join the fucking tide of people that are winning. We pay more for pretty much everything, and as a result, along with stagnant wages from the war on unions and Reagan started, more than half of America is stuck in something close to, if not deep, within a type of debt-driven poverty, from which escape is nearly impossible. I don't give financial advice anymore, especially in an unsolicited fashion, precisely because of this. Like, the average friend that I've made over the years lives paycheck to paycheck. They don't have anything to save, and if like, all of my money making techniques pretty much require you to have disposable income, and if you don't have that, I can't fucking help you. The GOP grift that started with Reaganomics and began destroying unions and imposed austerity took us from a nation where 2/3 of us had a middle-class lifestyle and let people buy a home and car, take out an annual vacation, put their kids through school, and retire comfortably with a pension, where only around 45% of us today qualify. The largest cohort in America today, like it was before the New Deal, the working poor is the working poor. The Republican grift has already reversed over 50 years of progress, and now Trump and the Vance want to double down. Meanwhile, conservatives on the Supreme Court told us that the same rip-off corporations are persons with constitutional rights, and money is First Amendment protected free speech. Thus, businesses and billionaires can now buy and sell politicians as easily as they can companies. 5 conservatives on the court, Clarence Thomas being the deciding vote after taking millions in gifts from billionaires and businesses before the court nailed down with this grift in 2010 over the loudest and shocked objections and dissidents of their colleagues with the Citizens United decision. So now corporations are people, and they can legally buy politicians and judges and justices. More recently, the Republicans on the court ruled that if a bribe is paid after the vote, legislation, or decision is rendered, it is merely a tip. It's a whole new grift. But when corporations kill people like Pacific Gas and Electric Company, or PG&E did when they were convicted of burning 84 people to death in 2018 and faced charges of murdering 4 more people in 2020, they don't get the death penalty or even send their decision-making executives to prison. They just reduce slightly their payouts to their stockholders to cover the fine so they can keep making money and from time to time killing more people. And up until recently, we've just been accepting these grifts. Few California politicians dare to stand up to PG any more than national politicians are willing to stand up to any other corporation. The resources of an even middle-sized national, transnational corporations are more than adequate to destroy or put and keep in office any politician from town clerk to U.S. Senate. Just ask sellouts like Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema. A column from the Washington Post asked the question, why is Washington so dysfunctional? The author interviewed 2 former members of Congress, a Democrat and a Republican, and a reporter whose beat is Congress. Not a single one identified the obvious and simple answer to the question: the giant grift given by money and politics, adopted by literally every Republican in Congress and more than a handful of Democrats, courtesy of Republicans on the Supreme Court and one of the last 4 Republican presidents. It's as if big money grifting in politics has become so normalized since Reagan that it just doesn't count. It doesn't occur to people inside the Beltway that it's at the core of our problems. The latest grift is Trump and Vance promising that they'll restore American greatness when it is their party in politics that stole American greatness, handing it off to the morbidly rich and the world's largest corporations. It's not complicated, and the voters have finally figured it out. Joe Biden is the first American president to repudiate liberalism since Reagan adopted it and imposed it on the American people in the 1980s, writing NAFTA and creating the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, gutting unions, and defunding education, blocking enforcement of antitrust law, and cutting taxes on the morbidly rich. Kamala Harris promises to continue Biden's return to the policies of Keynesian economics, and the Preef Americans want it. One, it is obvious from the explosion of donations and support for her candidacy. After 2 generations, the working class is beginning to climb out of the hole the GOP threw us into. We're on the verge of a new day of America, and it can't come soon enough. Unfortunately, Kamala lost. I voted for her, for the record, which is why I continue to sit here and be horrified at everything that is transpiring. But I often disengage because it's exhausting. It really is. I engage enough to show up in November and vote, but, you know, I just don't see the fucking point in constantly getting sucked into the sea of negativity. These are dark times in this country. We need escapes.